When the movie starts, we see the Galactic Republic having trouble because the Trade Federation is blocking trade routes to Naboo. Then, the Supreme Chancellor sends 2 Jedi Knights to solve the problem. Next, they try to board a Trade Federation battleship, but the Trade Federation leader, Newt Gunray, acts suspiciously. As the small space cruiser docks inside the huge Federation battleship, a protocol droid named TC-14 greets 2 darkly robed figures and guides them inside. Some worker droids express concern about the Republic cruiser. Inside the battleship's conference room, TC-14 guides Obi-Wan Kenobi and Qui-Gon Jinn. They discuss their mission to negotiate with the Trade Federation. Qui-Gon advises Obi-Wan to focus on the present. Meanwhile, Newt Gunray and Dalte Define are shocked to learn that the ambassadors are Jedi Knights. Later, in a hallway, TC-14 accidentally interrupts a confrontation between the Jedi and battle droids, narrowly avoiding harm as the Jedi defend themselves with lightsabers. The bridge becomes chaotic with alarms blaring. Newt and Rune watch O1 on the view screen before he is suddenly cut in half. Newt panics and orders the bridge sealed, but Rune fears it won't be enough. Outside the bridge, Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan fight battle droids as Qui-Gon begins cutting through the bridge door. As the sparks fly around the door on the Federation battleship's bridge, Newt orders the blast doors closed, but the Jedi keep cutting through. Despite the doors sealing shut, molten metal starts dropping away as the Jedi persist. Newt panics while Rune urgently asks for destroyer droids. Outside the bridge, 10 destroyer wheel droids transform into battle mode and attack. Qui-Gon senses their presence, and Obi-Wan remarks that negotiation is no longer an option. The Jedi evade the droids' fire and disappear, only to reappear at the end of the hallway. They flee through a closing doorway while the droids continue to attack. On the bridge, Newt and Rune watch the situation unfold on the view screen. Tejo informs them that the Jedi have escaped up the ventilation shaft. In the main bay, Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan observe thousands of battle droids being loaded onto landing craft. Qui-Gon realizes it's an invisible army and decides they need to warn Naboo and contact Chancellor Valorum. They agree to split up, each stowing aboard separate ships to meet on the planet. Obi-Wan remarks that Qui-Gon was right about the negotiations being short. The next scene we see, back on the bridge, Tejo receives a transmission from the planet, and Rune identifies it as Queen Amidala herself. Newt is hopeful, but Queen Amidala informs him that the trade boycott has ended and the Senate is voting on the blockade. She sees through Newt's deception, warning him that the Federation is going too far. Newt denies any wrongdoing, claiming Senate approval for their actions. After Amidala's transmission ends, Rune expresses concern about the Senate, but Newt is determined to disrupt communications on Naboo. At that time, in the Naboo Palace throne room, Queen Amidala and her advisors receive a malfunctioning transmission from Senator Palpatine, indicating a communications disruption. They suspect the Federation is jamming their transmissions and fear an invasion. Amidala insists on continuing negotiations, but Governor Bibble and Captain Panaka advocate for preparing to defend themselves. Troop transports begin deploying from the landing craft, and the droid invasion force emerges onto Naboo's surface. As Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan navigate the swamp, they encounter Jar Jar Binks, a banished Gungan. 2 Staps approach, prompting Qui-Gon to throw Jar Jar into the mud for safety. Qui-Gon deflects the Staps' laser bolts, destroying them, while Obi-Wan's weapon malfunctions. Jar Jar offers to guide them to safety in Oto Gunga, despite his fear of returning. As danger approaches, Qui-Gon decides to follow Jar Jar into the swamp for safety. In the Naboo swamp, Qui-Gon, Obi-Wan, and Jar Jar want to hide from bad guys, so they go underwater. They wear special masks to breathe. They follow Jar Jar to a cool underwater city called Oto Gunga. There they meet scary guards led by Captain Tarpals. They go to see Boss Nass, the big leader. Then Qui-Gon asks Boss Nass for help, but he says no at first. Qui-Gon uses Jedi magic to change his mind, and they get a fast boat called a bongo to go to Naboo. Jar Jar gets in trouble, but Qui-Gon helps him and brings him along. They go in a submarine, but they meet big sea monsters on the way. Qui-Gon says they must be brave and keep going. Then we see, on the Federation battleship's bridge, Newt and Rune talk to Darth Sidious, telling him about the invasion. Sidious is happy because the Senate is busy. Newt decides not to mention the missing Jedi yet. In the submarine, things get bad as sparks fly, water comes in, and the power goes out. Obi-Wan fixes it while Qui-Gon calms down scared Jar Jar. They escape a big sea monster and then a bigger one, thanks to Qui-Gon's quick thinking. Just after we see, as the droid army gets closer to Theed, Newt and Rune think they're winning. Underwater, the submarine gets close to the surface, making Jar Jar happy. Near a waterfall, they act fast to stay safe, but a battle droid causes trouble, and their sub falls down the waterfall. They must keep going, leaving the chaos behind. Inside the palace, Queen Amidala and her friends are surrounded by droids. Amidala won't give up, even though Newt threatens them. Qui-Gon, Obi-Wan, and Jar Jar save Amidala's group, impressing her. They all decide to go to Coruscant for help. Some warn about the dangers, but Amidala chooses to go to the Senate. As they head to their spaceship, they fight droid guards but manage to free the pilots. Amidala and her group rush onto the ship, with Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan fighting off more droids as they take off, escaping the enemy forces. As the sleek spacecraft exits the hangar, battle droids inside fire at them. Meanwhile, in the cockpit, pilot Reich Oli navigates toward the massive battleship despite the communication jam. In the droid hold, Jar Jar accidentally activates an astromech droid, which helps fix the ship's power drive. Qui-Gon and Captain Panaka decide to head for Tatooine for repairs. In the Federation battleship, Newt and Rune discuss their difficulties and the appearance of a Sith apprentice named Maul. On the Naboo spacecraft, Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan thank the little blue droid, R2-D2, for saving them, and Queen Amidala orders Padme to clean up the droid as thanks. In the main area of the Naboo spacecraft, Padme cleans R2-D2, while Jar Jar startles them both by popping out of an open door. They introduce themselves and Jar Jar explains how he ended up with them after a frightening encounter. Meanwhile, in the cockpit, Obi-Wan, Qui-Gon, and Captain Panaka observe as Reich Oli navigates toward Tatooine, aiming to land near the outskirts to avoid attention. The Naboo spacecraft lands in the Tatooine desert, and Obi-Wan begins work on the hyperdrive, while Qui-Gon senses a disturbance in the Force. They set out for Moas Ispa, with Qui-Gon cautioning against transmitting messages. Captain Panaka and Padme join them, with Padme eager to explore the planet. As they walk through Moas Ispa, Qui-Gon explains the inhabitants and warns Padme to stay close. Jar Jar is anxious, while R2 remains calm. They arrive at a junk dealer plaza to find a replacement hyperdrive part. In Watto's junk shop, Qui-Gon requests parts for a ship, and Watto calls in Anakin Skywalker, who works for him. Qui-Gon and R2 follow Watto to the junkyard, leaving Jar Jar, Padme, and Anakin in the shop. Anakin, intrigued by Padme's beauty, awkwardly compares her to an angel. He shares his life story as a slave and introduces himself as Anakin. Padme sympathizes with him, and they share a moment of understanding as Jar Jar accidentally activates a droid, causing some chaos. Watto won't take Republic money for the hyperdrive, so Qui-Gon, Jar Jar, and R2 leave. Anakin helps Jar Jar by claiming he's connected, stopping a fight. Padme introduces herself to Anakin, who seems sad when she leaves. Watto tells Anakin to clean up before going home. Then we see Anakin shows bravery by defusing a fight with Sebulba. Qui-Gon thanks him, and Padme smiles at him. Anakin shares wise words about fear and courage. Jar Jar admires Anakin's bravery, and Padme agrees. Anakin proudly shows his droid project to Padme, Qui-Gon, and Jar Jar. They take shelter from a sandstorm at Anakin's home. Anakin introduces them to his mom, Shammai, and shows Padme his droid project. Shammai thanks Qui-Gon for food, and they feel warm despite the storm. Anakin shows his protocol droid project to Padme, who's impressed. He talks about building a pod racer. C-3PO feels embarrassed without his coverings. During the sandstorm, tensions rise. Amidala gets a distress call from Naboo, while Sidious and Maul plan on Coruscant. Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan stay cautious, knowing time is running out. Inside Anakin's hovel during the storm, Qui-Gon, Anakin, Shammai, Jar Jar, and Padme eat and talk about their situation. Anakin wants to help by racing in pod racing, despite Shammai's worries. They decide to take the risk to help Qui-Gon. After the storm, Qui-Gon and Padme discuss trusting Anakin. They negotiate with Watto to sponsor Anakin in the race, using their ship as collateral. Obi-Wan worries, but Qui-Gon stays hopeful. Shammai tells Qui-Gon about Anakin's unusual birth. Anakin works on his pod racer with his friends and gets it ready for the race. Qui-Gon tends to Anakin's wound and secretly checks his blood, finding a high midichlorian count. He wonders what it means while Shammai watches. At sunrise, Padme wakes Anakin, who dreams about her leading an army. She reminds him to clean up. At the arena, Qui-Gon makes a bet with Watto for Anakin's freedom, using their new pod as collateral. Anakin gets ready for the race, reassured by Qui-Gon. At the desert race arena, the pod racers, including Sebulba and Anakin, get ready. Anakin receives encouragement from his friends, and Padme gives him a kiss for luck. However, when the race starts, Anakin's engine stalls, causing concern among his loved ones. Eventually, he manages to restart it and begins to catch up with the other racers. Showing off his skills, he overtakes competitors and deals with obstacles like Tusken Raiders shooting at the racers. Everyone watches anxiously, hoping Anakin will succeed. As Anakin races, he skillfully passes other racers while Sebulba sabotages competitors, causing chaos. Qui-Gon meditates, Padme and Shammai worry, and Jar Jar annoys Phanta for updates. Meanwhile, Watto laughs confidently, expecting Anakin's defeat. Anakin's pod shakes as he dodges explosions from other racers' pods. Anakin impressively moves up to 6th place, while others face mishaps, adding tension for Shammai and Padme. Despite Sebulba's sabotage, Anakin takes the lead, but Sebulba crashes, allowing Anakin to win. After the victory, Watto accuses Qui-Gon of cheating, but Qui-Gon remains calm and instructs Watto to fulfill their agreement. Finally, Qui-Gon defeats Darth Maul, and the ship escapes into space. Anakin meets Obi-Wan, amazed to encounter another Jedi. In the cockpit, Rick Ollie activates the hyperdrive, and the ship enters hyperspace. On Naboo, Federation droids patrol while Newt threatens Governor Bibble. Inside the ship, Padme notices Anakin shivering and offers him her overjacket. Anakin gives Padme a wooden pendant, symbolizing their bond. The ship lands on Coruscant, where Chancellor Valorum and Senator Palpatine await. Amidala expresses gratitude, and Palpatine discusses Senate matters. In the Jedi Temple, Qui-Gon informs the Council about the Sith Lord, assigned to protect Amidala. Anakin bids farewell to Padme and prepares to train as a Jedi. Amidala addresses the Senate, calling for a vote of no confidence in Valorum. On the Jedi balcony, Obi-Wan worries about Anakin's training. Qui-Gon insists on Anakin's potential despite Council doubts. In the Council chambers, Anakin faces a test, while Amidala decides to return to Naboo. In the Jedi Council chambers, Anakin's fate is debated. Despite Qui-Gon's insistence that Anakin is the chosen one and should be trained, the Council refuses, citing his age and the presence of too much anger in him. Qui-Gon decides to take Anakin as his ward but is forbidden from training him. The Council instructs Qui-Gon to take Anakin with him to Naboo but not to train him. As they leave Coruscant, Qui-Gon imparts some wisdom to Anakin about midichlorians and the Force. Amidala and her retinue also board the ship, and they all depart for Naboo. As the Naboo spacecraft approaches the planet, Anakin learns more about piloting from Rick Ollie. Meanwhile, Queen Amidala discusses her plan with Qui-Gon and Captain Panaka, expressing her determination to reclaim Naboo. The ship lands in a swamp on Naboo, where Anakin reunites with Padme and expresses his willingness to help. Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan discuss the Queen's plan and their role in the unfolding events. Obi-Wan apologizes for his earlier disagreement with Qui-Gon, who acknowledges his growth and potential as a Jedi Knight. In the Naboo swamp, Padme, accompanied by Captain Panaka, the Jedi, and her group, seeks an alliance with Boss Nass and the Gungans against the Trade Federation. Despite initial resistance from Boss Nass, Padme persuades him to consider an alliance by emphasizing their shared struggle against the Trade Federation's invasion. She promises that if they join forces, they can defeat the common enemy and protect their homes. Boss Nass reluctantly agrees to think about the proposal, but insists that Padme and her group must leave Naboo and not involve the Gungans in their fight. Padme accepts the condition, expressing gratitude for the opportunity to present their case and hoping for future peace between their peoples. Meanwhile, Newt Gunray, Rune Hako, and Darth Maul discuss the situation, with Darth Sidious advising patience and caution. Outside, the Gungan and Naboo forces prepare for battle, with Jar Jar reluctantly appointed as a general. Padme outlines the battle plan, involving a diversion by the Gungans to draw away the droid army, while the Naboo sneak into the palace to capture the Viceroy. Despite the risks, everyone is determined to proceed with the plan, knowing that the fate of Naboo hangs in the balance. In the Naboo Palace throne room, Darth Sidious approves of Newt Gunray's plan to wipe out the Gungan and Naboo forces, believing it will work to their advantage. At that time, in the Naboo swamp, the Gungan army mobilizes with soldiers riding Caddis and Fambas, equipped with shield generators. As they march towards the horizon, they encounter Federation tanks on a ridge. The Gungan general orders the activation of their shield, forming a protective barrier over their assembled warriors. Anakin has hidden. Anakin peeks out cautiously, watching them go. As the group heads towards the exit, they encounter little resistance, having cleared most of the battle droids in the hangar. Padme leads the way, determined to confront the Viceroy in the throne room. Then we see, in the Naboo grass plains, the Gungan army engages in a fierce battle against the droid army. Despite being outnumbered, the Gungans hold their ground, utilizing their shield generators and various weapons to fend off the droids. 9 oversees the battle from a vantage point, observing the Gungans' defensive efforts. Back in Theed, Darth Maul informs Newt Gunray and Rune Hako that the Jedi are involved in the attack, causing concern among the Federation leaders. The situation escalates as the battle intensifies both in the palace and on the grass plains, setting the stage for a climactic confrontation between the opposing forces. In the midst of the intense battle, Anakin finds himself in the cockpit of a Naboo starfighter, with R2 by his side. As Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan confront Darth Maul, Anakin takes control of the starfighter and begins firing at the destroyer droids, aiding Padme and her troops who are under attack. Despite his initial confusion and clumsiness, Anakin manages to operate the ship's weapons and shields effectively, dealing significant damage to the enemy droids. That time we see, in space, the Naboo fleet engages in a dogfight with Federation fighters as they approach the space station. Rick Ully coordinates the attack, directing different flight groups to target enemy fighters and make runs on the transmitter. The battle intensifies as both sides exchange fire in the vastness of space. Back on the grass plains of Naboo, Jar Jar's clumsiness inadvertently becomes an asset as he gets entangled with a blasted droid, causing it to malfunction and fire randomly, taking out several other droids in the process. However, the situation becomes more dire as UM-9 orders the deployment of wheeled droids, which roll through the Gungan deflector shields and transform to engage the Gungan forces in close combat. Despite their valiant efforts, the Gungans face heavy losses as the destroyer droids continue to wreak havoc on their ranks. Anakin flies back toward the battlefield. He spots the Federation battleship and realizes that's where the autopilot was taking them. Determined to make a difference, he takes control of the starfighter and steers it toward the battleship, despite the overwhelming odds. Meanwhile, inside the Theed power generator, the intense duel between the Jedi and Darth Maul continues. They maneuver across the narrow bridge, exchanging blows with incredible speed and skill. Darth Maul leaps onto a higher level of the bridge, with the Jedi following closely behind, their lightsabers clashing in a dazzling display of combat prowess. Outside the palace, Padme, Captain Panaka, and a small group of Naboo soldiers find themselves trapped by battle droids in a hallway. They blast their way out through a window and onto a ledge overlooking a waterfall. Using special attachments from their pistols, they shoot thin cables that embed into a ledge above them, allowing them to climb up the wall and escape. Back on the grass plains of Naboo, the Gungan army faces overwhelming odds against the destroyer droids. Despite General Seal's order to retreat, Jar Jar inadvertently causes chaos among the droids, destroying several with his clumsy actions and prompting the Gungans to renew their attack with renewed determination. In space, Anakin finds himself in the midst of the intense dogfight, maneuvering his starfighter with R2's help. Despite the danger, Anakin manages to regain control of the ship and joins the battle, determined to fulfill his role and make a difference in the fight for Naboo's freedom. Anakin, having managed to evade enemy fighters, finds himself inside the enemy space station's hangar, with R2 by his side. He struggles to regain control of his overheating ship as droids approach. After that, we see, in the Theed power generator pit, the intense lightsaber duel between Qui-Gon, Obi-Wan, and Darth Maul continues. Darth Maul kicks Obi-Wan off one of the ramps, causing him to fall several levels, while Qui-Gon engages the Dark Lord. Qui-Gon manages to knock Darth Maul off another ramp, and he lands hard on a lower level. Qui-Gon follows him, while Obi-Wan rushes to catch up. In the power generator's electric beam hallway, Darth Maul and Qui-Gon enter a long corridor filled with deadly rays that pulse on and off at regular intervals. Darth Maul makes his way down several walls of the deadly rays before they close, with Qui-Gon just one wall away from him. Obi-Wan, lagging behind, waits impatiently for the next opening in the wall of rays, who are engaged in a fierce lightsaber duel. Despite Obi-Wan's efforts, he arrives just in time to witness Darth Maul fatally strike Qui-Gon, leaving him slumped on the floor. Outside, the Gungans find themselves overrun by the droid army, with some fleeing into the hills while others are herded into groups by the relentless battle droids and destroyer droids. Jar Jar and General Seal are held captive among other officers, reflecting on the dire situation. Meanwhile, in the palace throne room, Padme, Captain Panaka, and their officers are brought before Newt, Rune, and the Neimoidian council members by battle droids. Sabe, disguised as the Queen, makes a bold entrance, revealing herself and declaring that they will not be signing any treaty. In the ensuing chaos, Padme takes charge, using the element of surprise to eliminate the remaining battle droids and assert her authority. In the power generator's melting pit, Obi-Wan engages in a desperate duel with Darth Maul, who seems to have the upper hand. However, in a dramatic turn of events, Obi-Wan manages to outsmart Darth Maul, ultimately defeating him and rushing to Qui-Gon's side as he lies dying. Obi-Wan cradles his fallen master, Qui-Gon, quietly weeping as Qui-Gon's last words echo in his mind. Meanwhile, aboard the Naboo starfighter in the Federation hangar, Anakin faces a group of battle droids surrounding the ship. With determination, Anakin activates the ship's systems despite the overheating warnings. As the battle droid captain demands Anakin's identification, the ship's engine ignites, and Anakin swiftly takes control. With the ship's shields up, Anakin deflects the droid's laser blasts, then fires back, causing chaos in the hangar. Launching torpedoes, Anakin inadvertently hits the reactor room, triggering a catastrophic explosion within the Federation battleship. Outside, on the Naboo grass plains, the droid army suddenly freezes in place, leaving the Gungans bewildered. In the main hangar courtyard, the Supreme Chancellor's cruiser lands as Captain Panaka and troops guard Nute Gunray and Rune Hako. Obi-Wan, the Queen, and her handmaidens confront the Neimoidians, demanding accountability. As the Chancellor and Jedi Masters descend from the cruiser, they praise Amidala for her bravery. Inside the turret room of the Naboo Palace, Yoda questions Obi-Wan's decision to train Anakin, but ultimately agrees to let him become Obi-Wan's Padawan. At Qui-Gon's funeral on the steps of the funeral temple, his body is cremated, and Obi-Wan assures Anakin that he will become a Jedi under his tutelage. As Qui-Gon's form fades away, Mace Windu and Yoda share a solemn discussion, realizing they faced a Sith. They wonder if it was the master or the apprentice who fell. In Theed's Central Plaza, jubilation fills the air as a grand parade unfolds. Children sing, flowers flutter, and cheers resound. Amidala, Palpatine, Anakin, Obi-Wan, and the Jedi Council unite, joined by Gungan soldiers, holding up the globe of peace as a symbol of harmony. Through this scene, this fantastic movie ends here.
The Episode 3 of Star Wars, also known as Star Wars Revenge of the Sith, begins, and we see Chancellor Palpatine has been kidnapped by General Grievous, the cough-prone cyborg leader of the droid army, and Obi-Wan and Anakin are zooming in to save the day. Obi-Wan's in a tight spot, and Anakin decides to risk the mission to go save him. But honestly, it wasn't much of a rescue. They get back on the ship, find out where Chancellor Palpatine is, and tell R2 to hide. Of course, they give him a radio that totally gives away his location. Classic move. The elevator suddenly stops, which is just insulting at this point. R2 gets busted while trying to restart it, but covers the droids with oil and sets them on fire. Obi-Wan and Anakin make it to the observation deck, where Palpatine is just chilling, handcuffed to a chair, completely unguarded. "I smell a trap," Obi-Wan thinks. And yep, Count Dooku shows up with his droid bouncers. Palpatine's like, "Call for backup," but Obi-Wan's feeling way too confident. They team up to fight Dooku, but the droids just stand there for a sec, not shooting for some reason. And when they finally do, it's like they only want to hit Obi-Wan. He deals with them, but Dooku chucks him like a ragdoll, trapping him under a platform. Now it's Anakin versus Dooku, and Dooku starts talking trash, calling Anakin a chicken. Anakin's not having it and slices off both of Dooku's hands. Payback time. Dooku chopped off Anakin's arm, so Anakin's all about revenge. Palpatine starts egging him on. "Finish him. Do it." Anakin hesitates like, "I really shouldn't." But Palpatine is like, do it. And Anakin's like, "Well, okay, I guess," and takes Dooku's head off. Instantly, Anakin's hit with the, "What have I done?" guilt trip. He feels bad for killing an unarmed guy, but Palpatine is like, "Bro, chill. This isn't your worst moment. Remember when you told me you wiped out those Tusken Raider kids? Yeah, this is nothing." They free Palpatine, and he tries to convince Anakin to leave Obi-Wan behind, but Anakin's not about that. "I'm not leaving without you, Master." On their way out, Obi-Wan and Anakin fall into a trap and get taken to General Grievous, who seems to be fighting a cold. Seriously, dude's got a cough. No jokes about loose wires here though. They break free almost instantly and start fighting their way out. Grievous smashes a window and makes his escape, taking all the escape pods with him. Of course, Anakin has to crash land the ship, but luckily he finds a landing strip just in time. Obi-Wan's like, "You call that a landing?" Once they're back at the capital, Obi-Wan and Anakin start complimenting each other in that awkward way. They split up, and Palpatine and Anakin go to meet with the Senate. Mace Windu pops in to remind them that finding Grievous is now the Jedi's top priority. Anakin sneaks off to meet Padme, giving her a kiss with the Senate just a few feet away. Bold move, right? He says he's kind of glad Palpatine got kidnapped, because it brought him back from the Outer Rim. But let's be real, there were tons of Jedi way closer who could have handled it. Seems like the entire Jedi Council decided to call Anakin and Obi-Wan from light years away to save the day when they were chilling nearby. Padme then drops the bomb. "I'm pregnant." Anakin's like, "Do you have a plan B?" But it's too late for that. It makes sense she wanted to tell him in person, but he didn't even know when he'd be back, so who knows how long she'd have waited. Meanwhile, Grievous flies off to the secret hideout and contacts Darth Sidious, who orders him to move the Separatist leaders to Mustafar. Grievous is a bit worried about Dooku being dead, but Sidious casually says he's already got a younger and stronger replacement lined up. Yep, hinting at Anakin. Back with Anakin, he's staring at Padme, playing with her hair while she talks about her plans for the baby. One we couldn't even keep if we wanted to. Anakin starts having nightmares about her dying during childbirth, but when he tells her, she's more concerned about them both losing their jobs if anyone finds out about the baby. They agree to keep the whole thing secret. Anakin's torn. "Could you live like that, Anakin?" she asks. And honestly, he's not sure. Anakin goes to Yoda for some advice about these nightmares he's been having. Yoda, in classic fashion, tells him, let go of everything you fear to lose. Basically, just dump her and move on. Meanwhile, Obi-Wan warns Anakin about Palpatine, who's gaining more power, and wants Anakin to represent him on the Jedi Council. Anakin's all excited, thinking, me, a Jedi Master? But they hit him with, you're on the Council, but we're not making you a Master. Anakin throws a full-on tantrum. Like, this is outrageous. It's unfair. Basically proving why he's not ready to be a Master in the first place. Then, the Council asks him to spy on Palpatine for them. Anakin's not thrilled about it. Obi-Wan goes behind his back and tells the Council everything. Total snitch move. He even asks Mace Windu and Yoda if they think Anakin is really the chosen one who's supposed to destroy the Sith and bring balance to the Force. Anakin's frustrated and complains that the Jedi are breaking their own rules. They should go back to the way things were. Padme, on the other hand, is like, the Senate is also corrupt and should return to its old ways. Why not bring it up to your buddy Palpatine? Anakin's shocked, like, how can you say that? That sounds like treason. He basically suggests she shout her opinions in public, completely forgetting that his whole motivation is to keep her safe, and treason usually leads to a death sentence. Anakin, still torn up about his nightmares of Padme dying, decides to chill with Palpatine, who invites him to watch some fancy bubble show. Then Palpatine drops the bomb that they found General Grievous. Oh, and on top of that, he shares this wild Sith legend about a dude who could literally stop people from dying. Convenient, right? Anakin's eyes light up. This is exactly what he needs to save Padme while she's pregnant. But of course, Palpatine's like, yeah, that's a Sith-only trick, dark side stuff. Meanwhile, over on Kashyyyk, the droid army's unloading to face off against the Wookiees, who are just chilling, waiting for the right time to strike. Back at the Senate, Palpatine wants to send Anakin to deal with Grievous, but the Jedi Council is like, nah, we're sending Obi-Wan. And of course, they can't resist rubbing it in. Master is needed, they say. Jerks. But Anakin actually takes it like a champ and tells Obi-Wan how much he respects him. They have this whole bro moment, where Obi-Wan's like, you're such a great Jedi, you make me look awesome. Anakin's all, he'll never let me down, he never has. Then, boom. Another nightmare of Padme's death. It's haunting him hard. He's so angry and stressed, can't even enjoy his usual stuff. Seriously, can't even focus on his video game. He runs to her and swears that he'll protect her. You will not take her from me, he vows. Meanwhile, Obi-Wan lands on this planet and is greeted by some vampire-looking dude who tells him where Grievous is hiding. He hops on this noisy lizard and rides up to the hangar where Grievous is hanging out, surrounded by droids. But instead of just having his army shoot Obi-Wan, Grievous is all, nah, I'll handle this Jedi slime myself. They duel for a bit. Then the clones arrive, and Grievous does what Grievous does best, hops on his unicycle and bolts. Obi-Wan gives chase on his lizard, looking like he's in the world's weirdest race. Back with the Jedi Council, they're planning to remove Palpatine from office once Grievous is taken care of. Palpatine's been busy getting in Anakin's head, telling him that the Jedi secretly want to take over the Senate. That's when the big reveal happened. Anakin realizes that Palpatine is none other than Darth Sidious. Palps is like, come closer, I've got good news. I'm controlling both armies, but I can also save Padme. Anakin's head is spinning, but instead of going full dark side right then, he decides to snitch to the Jedi Council because, snitches get stitches. But saving Padme is worth it. Meanwhile, Obi-Wan finally catches up to Grievous and, for some reason, thinks it's a great idea to punch and kick the robot. Yeah, not the best move. Grievous tosses him off a ledge, but Obi-Wan grabs a blaster, shoots the squishy, flammable parts inside Grievous, and that's the end of Mr. Robot. Anakin finally goes to Mace Windu, spills the beans, and is like, I think Palpatine's a Sith Lord. Mace's reaction? A Sith Lord? Yeah, we know, Mace. Keep up. But Anakin doesn't want Palpatine dead because, zombie magic. He still needs that Sith healing spell to save Padme. Anakin offers to help arrest Palpatine, but Mace is like, nah, you'll probably do something stupid. Spoiler, Mace was right. So, instead of doing the smart thing, like calling all the senators to let them know Grievous is toast and they can now take their power back, the Jedi think it's a genius idea to confront Palpatine privately. Mace and his squad of Jedi Masters barge into Palpatine's office. Lightsabers drawn. All, you're under arrest. But instead of Palpatine denying anything, he's just like, yeah, I'm evil. I am the Senate. Whips out his lightsaber and they all start fighting. The other Jedi Masters, they go down like a bunch of stormtroopers who forgot how to aim. But Mace holds his ground. Palpatine tries to fry Mace with his Force lightning, but Mace, being the badass he is, reflects it right back. Suddenly, Palps looks like he aged 500 years in 5 seconds. Gross. He's all, "Help me, Anakin, I'm too weak." Mace is about to end it, ready to finish off the Emperor, but Anakin, still obsessed with that zombie magic, decides that this is the moment to cut off Mace's arm. Mace is thrown out the window by Palpatine's lightning, probably thinking, "Yep, definitely should have left Anakin at the temple." Anakin, now totally consumed by the dark side, dedicates himself to Palpatine, who promptly names him Darth Vader. His first assignment? Destroy all the Jedi, starting with the kids. Because nothing says ultimate villain like going after the youngling. Meanwhile, Obi-Wan, completely unaware of Anakin's betrayal, is out giving orders to the clones and getting his lightsaber back from the coolest clone in the galaxy, Commander Cody. Everything seems fine until Palpatine drops Order 66. Suddenly, the clones turn on the Jedi, wiping them out left and right. Yoda, though? He dodges the whole thing and gets the Wookiees to help him escape. Obi-Wan manages to survive too, thanks to Senator Bail Organa swooping in with a rescue. Back in the city, Anakin checks on Padme. All, "Don't worry, I'm loyal to the Republic," while secretly planning his next move, which is to go massacre the separatist leaders on Mustafar. Because apparently, lava mining isn't dramatic enough. After wiping them out, he's officially on his way to full-blown Vader mode. Meanwhile, Palpatine, back in the Senate, calls an emergency meeting. With Grievous and the Separatists out of the way, he declares the Galactic Empire, basically going, "Democracy? We don't need that. Here's an empire instead." Obi-Wan heads over to Padme to figure out where Anakin is, but she's like, "No way am I telling you." She wants to find Anakin herself, despite Obi-Wan's subtle hint that he's kind of there to kill him. Obi-Wan, of course, sneaks aboard her ship, because apparently C-3PO is all the security a senator needs. Meanwhile, Yoda walks into Palpatine's office like an absolute legend, all ready to throw down. Palps, of course, starts with his favorite party trick, Force Lightning. Yoda's like, "Wait, what?" But then Yoda gives it back to him, shoving Palpatine into a chair with the Force, and Palps pulls the classic, "I'm too weak, don't hurt me" act, which Yoda's not buying for a second. So naturally, they kick off a crazy lightsaber duel that somehow ends up in the Senate chamber. It's like American Ninja Warrior, Jedi edition. They're flipping and jumping all over the place, while Palpatine, now resembling a weird mole-rat hybrid, starts chucking Senate chairs at Yoda like a kid having a tantrum. Yoda, being the ultimate Jedi boss, catches one, spins it around, and chucks it right back at Palps. They start blasting Force Lightning at each other, but it's like two kids trying to outsquirt each other with water guns. Eventually, the whole thing backfires and they both get thrown across the room. Yoda crashes, dusts himself off, and decides, "You know what? This whole Jedi thing isn't for me anymore. I'm out." He admits defeat and calls Senator Organa for an emergency pickup, like it's an Uber ride. While all that's happening, Padme lands on Mustafar, trying to reason with Anakin, but he's fully in his dark side crazy mode, talking about how she's gonna die and how he's going to save her. Super romantic, right? Then he drops the bombshell that he plans to overthrow Palpatine and rule the galaxy with her by his side. And Padme's like, that was not part of the marriage vows." Right when she's trying to talk sense into him, Obi-Wan chooses the perfect moment to stroll out of the shadows, like, "Sep, I'm here now," totally crashing their relationship argument. We'll never know if Obi-Wan was about to join Padme's side in this argument or pull out his lightsaber and end it right there. But Anakin doesn't even give him a chance to speak because he instantly assumes Padme brought Obi-Wan to betray him. Anakin, in full dark side anger management needed mode, starts force choking his pregnant wife. Obi-Wan's standing there like, "Dude, you just strangled your wife. I thought we were still cool after the whole younglings massacre, but this is too much." Obi-Wan's got no choice now. Time for the lava showdown. So, Obi-Wan and Anakin square off, and Obi-Wan decides to pull out his lightsaber first, totally against Jedi protocol. Jedi are supposed to use their lightsabers only for defense, not to initiate a fight. But, hey, it's personal now. The two of them go at it, wrecking everything in their path like it's the Destroy All Things episode of WrestleMania. They even end up on a conference table, which basically turns into a wrestling ring. Anakin loses his lightsaber at one point, but Obi-Wan keeps the attack going. Even though Obi-Wan swore he'd never kill him, he's definitely trying to finish this fight. At some point, they realize their lightsabers aren't doing enough damage, so they switch to using the Force and end up accidentally messing with a control panel that turns off the shields on the lava mining equipment. Now, the place is literally falling apart, but instead of stopping, they take their fight outside, balancing on a thin beam over lava. They tumble into a lava river, still going at each other. Obi-Wan grabs a rope and swings onto a platform like he's an Indiana Jones, while Anakin hops onto a nearby droid that's just trying to do its job. Then Anakin leaps onto Obi-Wan's platform but almost slips off. Obi-Wan, ever the dramatic one, makes his iconic jump to the higher ground on land. It's like, don't even think about it, Anakin. I've got the high ground. But Anakin, in full overconfidence mode, is like, yeah, I'm doing it anyway. So he jumps and promptly gets all his limbs chopped off. Oops. As if that wasn't enough, poor Anakin catches on fire, lying there like a smoldering mess. Obi-Wan, instead of helping his crispy ex-friend, just watches for a second, probably thinking, well, that escalated quickly. Then he picks up Anakin's lightsaber and walks away, not even putting him out of his misery. Meanwhile, Padme is in childbirth, and she's so heartbroken over Anakin's fall to the dark side that she basically gives up the will to live. Yet somehow, she finds enough strength to name her twins, Luke and Leia. Still, she's like, nah, living's too hard now. Her last words are, they're still good in him. But wait, if she believed that, wouldn't she want to live and help him redeem himself? Meanwhile, Palpatine finds crispy Anakin and slaps him into that shiny new Darth Vader cyborg suit to keep him alive. The first thing he tells him is, oh, by the way, you killed Padme. Nice. Vader has a little meltdown, destroying stuff with the Force. But hold up, Vader only promised to serve Palpatine as long as Padme lived. So technically, with her gone, he should have yeeted Palpatine out a window right then and there. As for the twins, they need to be hidden from their moody dad. Senator Organa takes Leia, while Yoda suggests Luke be sent to live with his aunt and uncle on Tatooine. Meanwhile, the Emperor's all excited about his shiny new space station. Remember that big space station the Emperor was building? Well, after 19 years, it's finally done. But guess what? The Rebel Alliance managed to steal some blueprints for it so they can figure out how to blow it up. The Empire isn't too happy about the stolen plans, so they send a huge Star Destroyer to chase down the Rebel ship. Instead of just blowing it up right away, which would be a quick end to this story, they decide to board the ship and get the plans themselves. Leia, being smart, hides the plans inside R2-D2 and sends a message with him. Then Darth Vader shows up and starts questioning the crew. When one guy doesn't tell him where the plans are, Vader kills him. Not the best way to get answers, but that's Vader for you. He tells his stormtroopers to capture everyone alive. Meanwhile, R2-D2 and his friend C-3PO escape in a pod. The Empire doesn't shoot it down because it has no life signs, so they think it's empty. Leia gets captured and brought to Vader, but neither he nor the Emperor realize she's his daughter. You'd think they'd notice, but no. Leia's brave, though. She says, the Senate won't stand for this. You can't attack a diplomatic mission. But Vader doesn't care. He's like, sure, keep talking, and they still can't find the plans on her ship. They figure the plans must be with the escape pod, so someone will have to go to Tatooine to get them. Vader's like, not me, I hate sand. It's rough, it's coarse, and it gets everywhere. So R2-D2 and C-3PO end up going their separate ways when they crash land on Tatooine. Unfortunately, both droids get grabbed by Jawas, who are like tiny scavengers collecting junk. The Jawas plan to sell R2-D2 and C-3PO to Luke and his Uncle Owen. Funny thing is, Uncle Owen doesn't even recognize C-3PO, even though they've met before. Guess droids just aren't that memorable? Anyway, Luke ends up cleaning them up. While washing R2, he finds a message from a mysterious lady who's in trouble and asking for help. Luke doesn't know it's his sister, but he thinks she's cute and decides to help her. Gross, right? R2-D2 tricks Luke into removing his restraining bolt by promising to show him the rest of the message. Luke is excited, but gets interrupted by his aunt and uncle, just as he's about to get started. Classic teen moment. Later, Luke tells Uncle Owen that he thinks R2 belongs to an old guy named Ben Kenobi. Obi-Wan didn't bother changing his name when he went into hiding, so Luke figures it's him. Uncle Owen, not a fan of old Jedi, tells Luke to stay away from Ben. He also says Luke can't take that pilot job he wanted and will stay on the farm for another year. Aunt Beru is a bit more supportive, saying Luke is just like his father, but Owen seems worried, remembering how that turned out. Feeling down, Luke goes to find R2, who has already left on a mission to find Obi-Wan. Luckily, R2 can't fly, so Luke and C-3PO catch up with him the next morning. They're attacked by the Sand People. Luke gets knocked out, and while everyone is fighting, Obi-Wan shows up. He makes a weird noise that scares the Sand People away. Luke wakes up to find Obi-Wan there, even though Obi-Wan doesn't recognize R2-D2, who has helped him a lot before. Maybe he just thinks all droids look alike? They get C-3PO, who's having a breakdown saying, just leave me here, I'm done for. And Obi-Wan finally starts talking about the Jedi. Obi-Wan tells Luke that he used to fight with Luke's dad, which should be a huge deal for Luke, but he doesn't react. Probably because Tatooine is so isolated that they don't talk about the Jedi here, and Owen and Beru aren't exactly sharing the family history. Obi-Wan decides to give Luke his dad's old lightsaber and says, "Your father wanted you to have this when you were old enough." Obi-Wan also casually mentions that Darth Vader killed Anakin, but he doesn't say that Anakin is actually Vader and went full dark side, murdering Jedi kids. He doesn't mention that Luke needs to learn this to help his sister. Probably didn't want to scare Luke with, "Oh yeah, your twin sister might also be on your dad's hit list." Luke wants to go with Obi-Wan, but is worried that Uncle Owen might get mad. Obi-Wan, being chill, just offers him a ride, like he's picking up a hitchhiker. Except, this ride comes with a lightsaber and destiny. Meanwhile, on the Death Star, the Emperor is fed up with the Senate complaining about blowing up diplomats. His solution? Fire them all. I am the Senate. So now it's just military people showing off their shiny new space station. They're excited about how scary the Death Star is, until one guy mocks Vader for not finding the rebel plans or the hidden base. Bad move. Vader's like, "You're underestimating the power of the Force," and uses a little Force choke on the guy for being disrespectful. Tough crowd. Back with Luke and Obi-Wan, they find a Jawa convoy that's been attacked. Luke realizes the Empire must have found out who bought the droids and is heading straight for his family. Instead of sticking with Obi-Wan, Luke decides to go alone to save Aunt Beru and Uncle Owen. Good plan, kid. When Luke gets back to his home, it's a disaster. The house is burning, and Aunt Beru and Uncle Owen are gone, cooked by the stormtroopers. He heads back to Obi-Wan where he sees R2 and 3PO with the Jawas, and decides, "Alright, I'm in. I've got nothing left to lose." They go to Mos Eisley to find a ship. The place is full of stormtroopers, but Obi-Wan uses his Jedi mind trick like it's nothing. He says, "These aren't the droids you're looking for, and the stormtroopers, not the sharpest tools in the shed, let them go." They go to a cantina where droids aren't allowed. Inside, Luke gets into trouble with some shady guys. Obi-Wan has to step in. He pulls out his lightsaber and cuts off a guy's arm. Luke thinks Obi-Wan is the coolest ever. They meet Han Solo, a pilot with money issues, and his furry co-pilot, Chewbacca. Before they can even talk about a ride, a bounty hunter named Greedo shows up. Greedo warns Han with McClunky, which means, "I'm about to shoot you." Han shoots first and walks away. They hurry to Han's ship, the Millennium Falcon. Just as they're about to take off, a rat-like creature tells the Empire where they are. Now they're being chased, but Luke still finds time to annoy Han. Meanwhile, on the Death Star, Leia is having a terrible day. She's taken to Tarkin, who looks ancient, so let's call him Grandma Tarkin, and insults him. Tarkin doesn't like that and threatens to blow up her home planet, Alderaan, unless she tells him where the rebel base is. Leia gives him a location, but Tarkin decides to blow up Alderaan anyway. He wants to show off his new toy. Alderaan goes boom, and Leia gets a crash course in aggressive negotiations. Back on the Millennium Falcon, Luke's trying out his new lightsaber and getting blasted by a training droid. Obi-Wan says, "Use the Force, Luke," and hands him a helmet that blocks his vision. They arrive at where Alderaan should be, but surprise, it's vanished. Before they can even react, they get pulled into the Death Star's tractor beam. Vader shows up with his spooky Sith vibes and senses Obi-Wan's presence. The crew hides in some smuggling compartments, then sneaks out, grabbing stormtrooper outfits to blend in. Classic disguise move. Obi-Wan goes off on his own mission to disable the tractor beam, leaving the others to be bored. R2-D2, being his nosy self, finds out that Leia is on the station and scheduled for execution. Luke, all hormonal and determined, wants to rescue her. Han's not interested until Luke mentions Leia is rich. Never mind that her entire planet just exploded. Details, right? Their plan? Pretend Chewbacca's a prisoner. Because nothing says subtle like dragging a giant Wookiee into a detention center. They storm in, blast the guards, and destroy the cameras. Luke finally reaches Leia's cell, and the first thing Leia says is, "Aren't you a little short for a stormtrooper? Maybe don't sass the guy rescuing you, Leia." The stormtroopers are closing in, so they jump into a garbage chute. Brilliant move, until they find themselves in trash water with an octopus-like creature that thinks Luke might be a tasty snack. Of course, Luke shows up again, because plot armor. Now they're stuck in a trash compactor with walls closing in. They try to reach 3PO on the radio, but he turned it off. So they're floating in this trash heap like it's a Star Wars escape room. Somehow, none of the crew gets flattened by the trash compactor's debris. Seems like only the walls are allowed to squish things. Luckily, R2-D2 saves the day by shutting off the compactor just before they all get turned into space pancakes. Meanwhile, Obi-Wan is sneaky beaky and manages to disable the tractor beam without making a sound. As they try to get back to the Falcon, stormtroopers are waiting, so Han decides to chase them down the hallway, because running headlong into danger is always a great plan. Surprise, it's a trap. Han and Chewie barely escape by closing the blast doors just in time. Back to Obi-Wan, who turns a corner and bumps into Vader, who's been waiting for this moment. Vader's all like, "My powers have doubled since last time we met," while Obi-Wan's thinking, didn't you get burned last time we met? Vader's still clinging to his I'm the master now attitude. Their duel? More like two grandpas waving their canes around. It's nothing compared to their fiery duel on Mustafar. This is more like watching two kids swat at each other with Christmas wrapping paper tubes. Yawn. Meanwhile, the rest of the crew is trying to sneak onto the Falcon, but there are stormtroopers guarding it. These troopers, however, are more interested in watching Vader and Obi-Wan's slow-motion fight than doing their actual job. Thanks to their distraction, our heroes sneak aboard the ship with some ninja moves. Just when everything seems to be going smoothly, Obi-Wan lets Vader strike him down. The stormtroopers, finally snapping back to reality, start shooting at them. Obi-Wan vanishes in a poof of Jedi ghostness, casually telling Luke to run while Luke's just standing there getting shot at. Not the best survival instinct, Luke. They finally manage to take off in the Falcon, and Leia, who just watched her entire planet get blown up, tries to comfort Luke, who's sobbing over a guy he barely knew. Meanwhile, Han gets back to business, announcing they've got company. Han's like, if this chase goes on any longer, we're all gonna end up as crispy critters. But Vader's got his own plans, and it turns out they're being tracked. Leia, ever the strategist, figures this out and says, they're tracking us. But hey, let's head to the secret rebel base anyway. What's the worst that could happen? She's got the Death Star plans and is banking on finding a weak spot. Let's hope she's right, or this rebellion's gonna be over before it starts. The rebels reach their base on the moon, but guess who shows up? The Death Star, looming on the other side of the planet. Instead of just blowing up Yavin and causing chaos, they orbit the moon, giving the rebels a chance to discover a weak spot in its exhaust port. Everyone's like, that's impossible, but Luke's all, it's just like when I used to hunt frogs back home. The meeting wraps up, and Luke finds Han packing up to leave. Han wants to pay off Jabba the Hutt, the gangster who runs the pod races. Luke calls him a selfish jerk, and Han's like, I just want to stay alive. Luke then tells Leia that Han's leaving, and Leia's all, okay? Luke's a bit hurt, thinking they were best buds, and starts missing Obi-Wan. He's like, I wish Ben were here. Leia kisses him to shut him up. Luke bumps into an old buddy, who questions if he's up for the suicide mission. Luke's like, of course I am. They try to give him another droid, but he's attached to R2-D2 and claims he's his new best friend. They head to the Death Star in their X-Wings, but the approach is a nightmare. They have to navigate a tight trench and dodge turbo lasers. TIE fighters come out to play, and lots of them are getting blown up. One poor pilot's last words are his friends calling him Fat Hawkins. It's all very chaotic. Seeing the mess, Vader decides to jump in and help. The Gold Team starts their trench run, but Vader's hot on their tail, saying, this is where the fun begins. He takes out one pilot, and another is like, let's get out of here. But Gold Leader is all, too bad you're on a suicide mission. Move right so I can get a clear shot. And then Vader takes out the Gold Leader. Now it's Red Team's turn in the spotlight. Red Leader gets knocked out, and his wingmen drop like flies. One of them's like, I got him, but misses and gets turned into space confetti. Luke's up next, but his stabilizer's on the fritz. R2's working his circuits off to fix it, but Obi-Wan's ghost shows up like, forget the computer, just use the Force. Luke's like, sure, let's ditch the targeting system and go full Jedi mode. Meanwhile, the rebel base is having a collective meltdown, thinking, we're all gonna die, and you're turning off the one thing that might save us? Seriously. To make things worse, Vader's hot on Luke's tail, close enough to give R2 a laser facial. The Death Star is gearing up to blow the rebel base to smithereens, and Vader's all set to finish Luke with a dramatic, this is the end for you. But then, bam, Han Solo swoops in out of nowhere. With some seriously lucky flying, he hits a 7-10 split, taking out Vader's wingman and sending him spinning into space. Guess he's gonna need another tow truck to get him back. Luke takes his shot, and surprise! The space torpedoes are now homing missiles. They make a sharp turn and hit the Death Star's exhaust port right on target. Boom! The Death Star explodes just before it can fire on the rebel base. Talk about cutting it close. Leia decides to reward Luke and Han for their bravery with shiny medals. Chewbacca's there too, but of course no medal for the Wookiee, classic disrespect. Episode 4 ends on a high note, but don't get too comfy because it's time for Episode 5. So the rebels blew up the Death Star. Yay. But guess what? The Empire still knows where their base is, so they have to pack up and head out. Their new home? Hoth. It's a frozen wasteland where it's cold 24/7. Darth Vader is seriously miffed about losing his giant space toy, aka the Death Star, and guess who he's got in his crosshairs? That's right, Luke. Meanwhile, Luke and Han are out cruising the frozen wasteland on their horned llamas when they spot a probe from a Star Destroyer and starts heading back to base. Luke, however, decides to play hero and gets ambushed by an abominable snowman. Back at base, Han's got some bad news. Jabba the Hutt is still after him for that debt. Jabba's patience is shorter than a Wookiee's temper. so Han figures it's better to handle it himself before the bounty hunters start showing up. He tells Leia he's bouncing, and she responds with a casual, "Cool, have a safe trip." Just as Han's about to leave, C-3PO informs him that Luke hasn't come back yet. Han heads to the gate, but the officer warns him the temperature is dropping fast. Han, being the reckless space cowboy he is, just shrugs and says, "Well, looks like 2 of us might freeze to death then," and rides off into the icy night to find Luke. Meanwhile, in the Wampa's cave, Luke's hanging upside down like a slab of space meat. But hey, the Wampa left his lightsaber conveniently close by. Using the Force, Luke manages to pull the lightsaber to him. Guess sometimes you can just wing it and hope for the best. Forget Yoda's do or do not mantra. Luke's proving that sometimes just trying is enough. Luke cuts himself down, luckily not impaling himself with the lightsaber, and just as the Wampa comes over for a snack, Luke slices off its arm and bolts into the freezing wasteland. Instead of staying in the relatively warmer cave, he's like, "Nah, I'll just go freeze to death outside." He stumbles through the snow and eventually passes out because, duh, it's freezing. But wait. Plot twist. Obi-Wan's ghost shows up with a casual, "Hello there," and tells Luke to go find Yoda on Dagobah. Meanwhile, Han is out on his Tauntaun, which decides it's had enough of the cold and keels over. Han's like, "Well, I read this survival guide somewhere," and slices open the Tauntaun, stuffing Luke inside like it's a fleshy sleeping bag. Back at the base, the rebels assume Han and Luke are goners and shut the doors like, "Oh well, we're staying warm." The next morning, the rebels head out to look for their frozen friends, but find them alive and snuggled up in their Tauntaun sleeping bag. Anyway, Han can't leave yet because the shields are down. Han, of course, assumes Leia is just using this as an excuse to keep him around. "She's totally got a crush on me," he muses. Leia decides to mess with Han and kisses Luke, which makes Han fume in the corner. Suddenly, they pick up a signal and C-3PO's like, "Oh hey, that's an Imperial code." Han checks it out and ends up shooting the probe droid, which of course alerts the Empire that something's up on Hoth. Smooth move, Han. Back on the Imperial side, there's an officer who's sure the rebels are on Hoth. His boss is like, "Nah, you're just paranoid." But Vader, ever the mood killer, chimes in with, "Skywalker is definitely there." How he knows Luke's name? No one's quite sure, just Vader things. The boss looks at the officer like, "Great, now you've gotten me killed." Back at the rebel base, Han and Chewie are still struggling to fix the Millennium Falcon, while Luke is gearing up to head to Dagobah, thanks to Obi-Wan's ghostly advice, or maybe just from freezing his brain. The Imperials show up way too close to Hoth, and the rebels are like, "Great, just what we needed." They could have made a clean getaway if they'd evacuated earlier, but Han had to shoot a probe droid. Now it's full-on chaos. The rebels are forced into a ground assault as Vader gets super cranky and force chokes his admiral through the TV. The Empire's rolling out these giant metal dogs, AT-ATs, and the rebels are scrambling to fend them off. With blasters proving useless against their thick armor, they get creative and start tripping them up with tow cables. Once the AT-ATs hit the ground, their armor is suddenly as flimsy as paper, and the rebels can finally shoot them down. The rebel base is falling apart faster than a cookie in hot tea, and Han has to rush to get Leia onto the Falcon. Vader shows up, fashionably late as always, and just misses them as they make their escape. Conveniently, the rebels also relocated Luke's X-Wing, with R2-D2 strapped in like a loyal Uber driver. Luke's heading to Dagobah without a hitch because apparently all of Vader's ships decided to tail the Falcon instead. Their hyperdrive's busted, so they're stuck at sublight speed with a squad of TIE fighters hot on their tail. So what's their brilliant plan? Fly straight into an asteroid field, because that's totally rational, right? Of course, someone brings up how dangerous this is. Cue the odds. The chance of successfully navigating an asteroid field is approximately 3,720 to 1. But in real life, the asteroids would be spaced out miles apart, so this whole scene is way more intense in the movies. Han's like, "Never tell me the odds," and heads straight for the most reckless path possible. They find a big asteroid with a conveniently placed hole and decide to hide out there. Meanwhile, Luke crash lands on Dagobah, and immediately gets his X-Wing stuck in the swamp. And what's his next move? He tries to shoot Yoda when he first shows up. To be fair, Luke doesn't know it's Yoda, so Yoda decides to mess with him. He goes through Luke's stuff like a nosy roommate. Luke's already being a jerk, snapping, "I don't want your help, I just want my lamp back." Yoda, being the troll he is, takes a bite out of Luke's dinner. Luke's reaction? He throws it away like, "Gross, someone's already had a bite of this." Yoda, still playing his game, tells Luke he knows where to find the real Yoda and drags him back to his swampy little mud hut. Back in the asteroid cave, Han and Leia are getting cozy. But just as things start heating up, boom, 3PO barges in like the ultimate third wheel. "Sorry, sweetheart, no time for romance when I'm around," poor Han. Meanwhile, the Imperial fleet is getting battered by asteroids, but does Vader care? Nope. as long as someone finds the Falcon. He orders the whole fleet into the asteroid field, but, plot twist, he has his ship fall back because he needs better cell reception to call the Emperor. Priorities. During their holo chat, Palpatine drops a bombshell. By the way, that Skywalker kid who blew up the Death Star? Yeah, he's your son. Vader's like, what? You're messing with me. Palps insists it's true, but Vader's already got his own secret plan brewing. The Emperor wants Luke dead, but Vader's thinking, I could totally turn this guy to the dark side. Back on Dagobah, R2's supposed to be keeping an eye on the camp, but like the nosy little droid he is, he sneaks off to follow Luke and Yoda. Meanwhile, Yoda's trying to teach Luke some patience, but Luke's having a full-blown toddler tantrum. No, I don't even know why I'm here. This is a waste of time. He's throwing the Jedi equivalent of a temper tantrum, which only proves Yoda's point. Then Yoda drops a bombshell. He was just pretending to be crazy as part of some twisted test. Yoda casually mentions he's been spying on Luke his whole life. Talk about a major privacy invasion. So Yoda makes Luke promise to stick around until his training is done. Luke's all, I swear, I got this. I won't fail you. Yeah, we'll see about that. Meanwhile, the Imperial fleet's getting desperate. They can't find the Falcon, so their bright idea is to start dropping bombs randomly on asteroids. Han and the gang hear some noise, and Leia's like, hey, go check that out. Turns out it's just a bunch of space bats, Minox, hanging out outside the ship. They then start to realize something's off, like the fact that they're in a giant space worm's mouth that's just chilling with its mouth wide open. You know, as one does. Back on Dagobah, Yoda's now riding Luke like a backpack, dishing out life lessons and telling him to stop asking so many questions. Typical. Then Yoda points Luke toward this creepy cave and tells him to leave his weapons behind. But what does Luke do? Takes his lightsaber anyway. So much for that Jedi discipline. Inside, he encounters Darth Vader, except it's not really Vader, and they have this bizarre slow-motion fight that ends with Luke chopping off Vader's head. But instead of a decapitated helmet, Luke sees his own face inside. It's like a bad dream, but also a huge hint he's totally missing. Meanwhile, Vader's busy hosting a job fair for bounty hunters, hiring a bunch to help track down the Falcon. The Imperial officers get lucky and spot Han and the gang, only to lose them again almost immediately. Nice job, guys. Better keep those bounty hunters on speed dial. Back on Dagobah, Luke's taking his training to the next level by trying to levitate rocks while doing a handstand. R2 starts freaking out because the X-Wing is sinking deeper into the swamp. Yoda's like, don't stress, just use the Force and lift it out. But Luke's attempts barely make a dent. Yoda, clearly done with Luke's whining, just casually lifts the X-Wing out like it's a feather. Meanwhile, Vader's back to his usual shtick, choking out officers who keep losing the Falcon. Turns out, Han and the crew have been hiding on top of the Star Destroyer this whole time. Their brilliant escape plan? Wait until the Empire dumps their space trash and then sneak out like, yeah, no one will notice us in the garbage. Smooth move, right? They're headed to Cloud City to meet Han's old buddy, Lando Calrissian, who's basically the galaxy's smoothest gambler and troublemaker. Leia's already rolling her eyes at the thought of meeting this guy. But guess who's lurking in the trash? Boba Fett. This guy's one step ahead, tracking them like the galaxy's sneakiest bounty hunter. Seriously, it's like he was parked right next to the garbage chute. Back on Dagobah, Luke's still balancing on his hands and trying to visualize his next move when he suddenly has a vision of Han and Leia in deep trouble. Luke's all fired up to rescue his friends, but Yoda's like, hold your horses. You promised to finish your training, and breaking promises doesn't help anyone. Leia's got this gut feeling they should bail on Cloud City, but Lando's like, nah, let's stick around. What's the worst that could happen? They land the Falcon, and Lando tries to act all cool with Han, only to hug him like a long-lost buddy. The guards, unimpressed, are like, alright, enough with the buddy-buddy act, let's get back to business. Turns out the Falcon used to belong to Lando, and he's pretty ticked that Han swiped it. Han's like, dude, you lost it fair and square. Meanwhile, 3PO finds what he thinks is R2 in a closet, only to get blown up. Back on Dagobah, Yoda and Obi-Wan are having a meltdown about Luke potentially turning to the dark side. They're all like, remember the cave. But honestly, Luke did pretty well against Vader. I mean, cutting off Vader's head is a solid win in my book. Meanwhile, Chewie's rummaging through the recycling center, fighting off little guys over parts. Lando, trying to prove Leia right, takes Han and Leia straight to Darth Vader. Vader's like, hey, want a drink? Han's response, I could really use a stiff one right about now, because nothing says welcome to my lair like a casual drink offer. They throw Chewie into a cage and lock up 3PO, who's in pieces. Vader decides it's time to test the carbon freezing chamber on Han, just to make sure it won't kill Luke. Leia, all emotional, tells Han she loves him and that he doesn't creep her out anymore. Han's classic reply, I know, because Han Solo's idea of romance is basically saying, yeah, I'm awesome, I get it. When they pull Han out of the carbon freeze, his handcuffs have mysteriously vanished. Move telling Lando to take Leia and Chewie to the ship instead of sending his own troops. Lando's like, dude, they're supposed to be under my supervision. Vader's like, nah, I've got this. Luke shows up just in time to see Han being carted off and Leia and Chewie being kidnapped. Leia's like, it's a trap. And Luke's all, yeah, no kidding, I'm going anyway. Vader's got some fancy lighting effects going on, creating that dramatic, I'm the bad guy ambiance. He sees Luke and says, you're shorter than I expected. Instead of a straightforward surrender, they dive into a lightsaber duel. Vader's using his Apple Watch to call for backup, because why not? Lando's like, oops, sorry for the trap, but he makes a deal to save Leia and Chewie. Then Vader goes and changes the deal right in front of them. Classic Vader move. Leia's not thrilled and starts yelling at Lando, while Chewie's busy choking him. Meanwhile, Vader's in full sentimental villain mode, trying to bond with Luke. I wasn't always like this, you know? I used to be just like you. Luke's not impressed, especially after losing his lightsaber like it's a new dance move. Vader's like, let's have a heart-to-heart. But instead of a cozy chat, it's straight to the carbon chamber. Luke makes a dramatic escape, just in time. Vader starts throwing random objects at Luke, like it's a very intense game of dodgeball. Luke manages to break a window and get sucked out into the void. Vader's like, oh well, guess I'll just make him mad and turn him to the dark side. Meanwhile, the rest of the gang makes their escape on the Falcon. Vader's trying his hardest to sell the join me and rule the galaxy pitch, but Luke's not buying it. When Vader drops the bombshell, I'm your father, Luke's reaction is pure gold. I'm sorry, what now? Vader's like, join me and we'll overthrow the Emperor. Luke's response, nope, not interested. Desperate, Luke takes a leap of faith, landing on an antenna. Vader's like, well, that's unexpected. They call it a diplomatic solution. Luke uses the Force to reach out to Leia, who senses he's in trouble and decides to rescue him. Lando's stunned she was right, and Leia's like, yeah, I've got the Force too. It's not just for Jedi. They get Luke aboard the Falcon, but the ship's still under attack. They try to jump to light speed, but oops, the hyperdrive is still down. R2, who's been busy trying to fix C-3PO, finally realizes the gravity of the situation and switches to hyperdrive repairs. And with that, Episode 5 wraps up. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe. Darth Vader and the Emperor are finishing up the new Death Star. When Vader gets on board, he tells the commander to stop trying to impress him. Everyone is tired of waiting. They've been working on this Death Star for 4 years, which is much better than the last one that took 20 years. Vader says they need to be patient and warns the commander that the Emperor is coming to speed things up. The commander complains that he's not a construction boss, he leads soldiers, and the stormtroopers should be out doing their jobs, not fixing toilets. Meanwhile, C-3PO and R2-D2 are heading to Jabba's palace with an important message. They arrive at what looks like a loading area, but 3PO gets scared when he sees some rough creatures and a guy with snake hair. R2 plays a message from Luke, who sounds really formal and tries to make a deal with Jabba. He flatters Jabba, saying, "Oh, mighty Jabba, you're so powerful." The message gets awkward, and Luke even sends the droids as a gift, but Jabba just laughs and sends them to the torture chamber. That night, Jabba throws a party, and the band is so bad that even Boba Fett thinks about taking them out. Jabba isn't having much fun either when one of his dancers falls into a trapdoor because she doesn't like his looks. Then, a bounty hunter shows up, dragging Chewbacca on a leash. Meanwhile, the bounty hunter sneaks around and unfreezes Han, but it's loud enough to wake everyone up. After a noisy argument about Han being blind and needing to be quiet, they manage to escape, sort of. Everyone wakes up and catches them anyway, making it all feel pointless. Han finds himself locked in a cell with Chewie, who tries to comfort him, saying Luke has a plan. Han isn't too sure, remembering that the last time he saw Luke, he was stuck with a giant snow beast. Little does he know, Luke has been training hard with Yoda. Eventually, Luke shows up and uses the Force to choke the guards, just like his dad did. He then sees his sister, Leia, tied up in a not-so-great outfit, but he's too focused on saving them. He tries to use a Jedi mind trick on Jabba, but it totally fails. Jabba isn't fooled and threatens to kill them, sending Luke down into a trapdoor. In this dark pit, he has to fight a giant monster called a Rancor. Luke cleverly hides and rushes for the door, but it's locked. He throws a skull at a button, which crushes the Rancor and lets him escape just in time to see the Rancor's keeper crying over his pet. Now, Jabba wants to throw Han, Chewie, and Luke into the Sarlacc pit, a huge creature with a mouth in the desert. They ride on sand skimmers, and R2 is dressed as a cocktail waitress, serving drinks. When they get to the pit, they have to walk the plank. Luke starts trash-talking before signaling his friends that it's time for the backup plan. He jumps off the edge in style, flipping onto a boat, while R2 throws his lightsaber to him. The bad guys don't shoot while he waits for his weapon. Once he gets it, Luke goes full Jedi, taking down enemies like a pro, just like his dad taught him. Boba Fett tries to shoot him, but Han accidentally bumps him and he flies into the pit. Jabba is mad, so Leia gets fed up and breaks his DJ setup. Then she uses her chain to choke him. She's finally free, but Lando is in danger of falling in too. Chewie saves him by lowering the blind guy down to grab Lando and gives him a gun to shoot the Sarlacc's tongue that's grabbing him. They pull him up just in time, and Luke grabs his sister and swings onto their ship. R2-D2 helps Leia break her chains and saves C-3PO from a rat monkey. They shoot the deck before jumping off, causing an explosion to finish off any enemies left. The group splits up, with Luke and R2 heading back to see Yoda. He promised to train Luke, and Luke wants to keep that promise. Luke lands on the ground, and Yoda greets him with, "Thanks for coming back. I'm about to die." "Master Yoda, you can't die," Luke pleads, but Yoda just wants to finish training him. Yoda tells him to share what he learned, even though Luke hasn't learned much. "Oh, by the way, there's another Skywalker," Yoda adds before he passes away. Luke is sad about Yoda's death when Obi-Wan appears to comfort him. Luke asks why Obi-Wan lied about Vader killing his dad. Obi-Wan explains, "I couldn't do it, so you need to." Luke asks about the other Skywalker and Obi-Wan reveals, "It's your sister, Leia." He tells Luke to hide his feelings and finish the job. Luke heads back to the base just in time to join Han, Chewie, and Leia for their next mission. The rebels have found the new Death Star and know the Emperor is on board. They plan to attack while it's not fully working yet. There's a shield on the forest moon of Endor that needs to be turned off for their attack. Han tells Lando, who's leading the attack on the Death Star, to take the Falcon for good luck. But Palpatine is already at the Death Star and asks Vader if he's still looking for Luke. "I wish I could ignore my feelings, but I can't." Vader replies. Palpatine tells him not to worry because Luke will definitely come to find him. "Bring him to me. Together we can turn him to the dark side," Palpatine plans while giving Vader a bunch of tasks. Vader, feeling unappreciated, waits at the command ship. Meanwhile, Han tries to sneak up on some guards but steps on a stick. Oops. The guards alert everyone. Chewie takes a good shot, and Han takes down another guard, but there are still two more to deal with. Luke and Leia go after them, but their mission is at risk because of their mistakes. Luke jumps on a hover snowmobile and throws a stormtrooper into a tree. Two more set up a speed trap and chase after him. Luke decides to take care of them while Leia stays behind, but a stormtrooper shoots her, and she falls off, watching him crash into a tree. He finally gets back to Han, Chewie, and the small army they forgot about. They wonder where Leia is because the leaders decided to leave their team to search for her. Meanwhile, a teddy bear finds Leia and wakes her up. The bear tries to attack her with a spear, but she distracts him with cookies, and they become friends. But just when things seem calm, they get shot at, and Leia keeps popping her head up. A stormtrooper spots her, but the Ewok saves her by smashing the trooper's shin. Leia grabs the stormtrooper's blaster and takes him out. Han and the others arrive where Leia was attacked, but all they see are wrecked speeders and think she's gone. Couldn't they tell she wasn't dead by the bodies? Someone wonders. They're on a secret mission, so they don't have time to check. They find Leia's hat, which is perfectly fine, and just assume she's definitely gone. Chewie, feeling upset, goes looking for food and accidentally triggers a trap. Instead of pulling everyone to safety, he steps forward and gets them all caught. Thankfully, they're only stuck for a moment because R2-D2 has a circular saw. Just when things couldn't get weirder, the Ewoks roll in, mistaking C-3PO for a god. Initially reluctant to help the humans because they look rather juicy, he changes his tune when Leia struts out in a brand new outfit. The Ewoks decide she's no longer on the menu. Luke, ever the Jedi in training, orders C-3PO to rally the Ewoks. They spring into action, freeing their friends while C-3PO starts spinning tales of their epic journey. With their new furry allies, the gang is ready to take on the Empire. Meanwhile, Lando and the crew are probably wondering where the heck everyone is. The Ewoks want to make Luke one of their own, but he's like, "Thanks, but I'm good." He confides in Leia that he must split because Vader's got a knack for sensing him. Oh, and surprise, he reveals they're siblings and she's got the Force too. "Wait, I've kissed you before." Gross, she shrieks. Leia insists he hides somewhere else, but Luke, in typical heroic fashion, is all about redeeming Vader. So he decides to turn himself in, because why not? When Vader sees him, he says, "You're just like I remember from my dreams." Which is a little creepy, honestly. Luke claims he's alone, but Vader's not buying it. "You still have goodness in you," Luke insists, but Vader prefers discussing his shiny new lightsaber instead. In a secret plan, Leia and Chewie buddy up with the Ewoks instead of their soldiers. One sneaky Ewok swipes a speeder to distract the stormtroopers, leaving only one guard behind. Han just taps the guard on the shoulder, and poof, they're in. Meanwhile, Vader drags Luke to meet Emperor Palpatine. The Emperor uncuffs Luke and sends the guards packing. Feeling confident, Luke retorts, "You can't turn me. I guess we're both doomed." But Palpatine just laughs, revealing, "I leaked the rebel attack information. I'm always 2 steps ahead." Oh snap. Luke realizes his friends are walking into a trap. Back on Endor, the rebels are in a pickle. They can't disable the shields for Lando and the Mon Calamari fleet to launch their attack. Just when things seem bleak, C-3PO calls for stormtroopers, and the Ewoks prepare to launch an ambush with slingshots and rocks. Meanwhile, Leia and Han realize they need R2-D2 to get back into the bunker. The Ewoks surprisingly hold their own against the stormtroopers. Meanwhile, Lando's team is in a tight spot where it commands the Star Destroyers to trap the fleet. The Emperor keeps taunting Luke, urging him to kill him. But just as Luke tries to strike, Vader steps in, saying, "If you're not with me, you're against me." Amidst the chaos, some Ewoks steal a vehicle to rescue Han and Leia, who are still struggling to get inside after Leia gets shot. Luke and Vader engage in an epic duel, and Vader tosses his lightsaber at Luke. Han, ever the trickster, pulls off another sneak attack, and they blow up the bunker. Vader, playing mind games, tells Luke he knows about Leia. "We have to save her." "I can't believe I put her in danger," Luke exclaims. Vader assures him no harm will come to her, which is suspicious, considering Leia is with the Emperor. Vader reminds Luke that Obi-Wan failed to keep Leia hidden, and suggests that if Luke won't join the dark side, maybe she will. This lights a fire under Luke, and he fights back fiercely, slicing off Vader's hand. "Not again," Vader cries, frustrated. The Emperor, still trying to manipulate Luke, says he can take Vader's place if he kills him. But Luke stands firm. Han manages to take down the shields, allowing the remaining ships, including the Falcon, to finally attack the Death Star. The Emperor starts zapping Luke with lightning, and Luke thinks, "Yoda could have warned me about this." Meanwhile, Vader, watching the scene, realizes that even a little zap hurts. Luke pleads with Vader. Vader finally realizes that he is being manipulated all this time, so he pick Emperor and throw him from the edge. Back with Lando and the crew, they're still fighting the Star Destroyers outside. A few brave pilots kamikaze the control deck, crashing it into the Death Star, just as Luke tries to pull Vader to safety. "Where do you want to go?" Luke asks desperately. Vader, wanting to see Luke one last time, removes his mask, revealing a face that looks like a melted marshmallow. "I need you to tell Leia something for me," he says. "But don't say I'm sorry for almost getting you executed or for blowing up your home planet." He wants her to know he wasn't all bad. "I tried to kill my daughter, but I couldn't kill my son." Classic Vader, huh? Just as he dies, Luke's like, "I can't breathe," trying to haul his father's lifeless body away as Lando blows up the Death Star. Back on Endor, the rebels are partying hard, but Han's feeling insecure about his relationship with Leia. She drops the bomb that Luke is her brother. Han is shocked. "Wait, you two have kissed? Gross, I think I'm gonna be sick." Later, Luke holds a funeral for Anakin. "My father is truly gone," he reflects. But he still feels the need to crash the party to remind everyone he's alive. Staring into space, he's joined by the Force ghosts of Obi-Wan, Yoda, and Anakin, who give him a silent thumbs up. Leia arrives to bring Luke back to the celebration. As the scene shifts, we see other planets across the galaxy celebrating too. Looks like peace might finally reign for a while.